Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Dillon and Steve, the Property Inspectors podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about what to look out for when buying a renovated or flipped house and some questions you should be asking along the way.
The Property Inspectors expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, reliance on, or inability to use this podcast or the information presented in this podcast.
Okay, man. I think we should get started just kind of speaking about the differences in different professions when dealing with renovations.
Absolutely.
Right? So I think I'd break it into three. I think you could be dealing with a professional reno, which would be a homeowner spending money on a contractor to do the renovation. Their pockets could be very deep, right? So I think that'd be potentially best case scenario when buying a renovated property. I think the next one would be potentially a flipper, right? Which I feel like a lot of people give a lot of slack, right? Sometimes they don't have the best name, but a lot of times a flipper is basically, almost at a home builder level where they have their trusted trades, right? It's not their first rodeo. They've been doing many houses. They've had, so if they've done houses and they've had feedback from old customers saying, hey, we had this issue, we've had this issue, right? And then one thing that I think falls into both of those, so they could be a renovation, they could be a flipper as well as a DIYer. And I think those are the ones that you, sure, they could do decent work, but I'm sure you notice as well as you get further out from the city, right? You find a lot more of the DIYers, and it can be very scary sometimes.
And it's true because the standards certainly change the further you get away from the urban areas.
Yes.
Farther and farther you go.
Yeah.
I'm not going to use words like farmers, but you know what? Things got to get done. We
Sometimes,
gotta keep moving.
Sometimes it's at a farm.
It's at a farm. Yeah. No, and you have a really valid point with that too. And then we look at the renovation side where somebody's opening their wallet to renovate an existing home. We did a small renovation in our home, not over the top. You were involved in it too, right?
Yeah.
We spent some money because this is a home we're going to live in. So quality went into it.
Yes.
But in that same conversation, like you said, a lot of these established renovating contractors and people that are doing smaller work in homes, they can offer warranties.
Yeah.
Right? They can even fall into the Alberta New Home Warranty Program as renovations. So there's an accountability level and a professional environment that goes with that conversation.
Yeah.
Not many renovation companies buy homes to flip them.
No.
Right?
No, but some renovation companies work for investors who are flipping them,
and
right?
you've been in that seat.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like there's some very good flippers in the city, right? Like that do, no, for sure. And I feel that, a lot of guys are basically just GCs, right? Where they know, they have the knowledge, okay, I'm getting an HVAC guy in to do my heating.
Right.
I'm getting a plumber to do my plumbing. I'm getting my electrician to do my electrical. Where you can get into some people are with the DIYer when they try to tackle their own electrical, their own plumbing, their own heating. That's when you can get into some serious issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And then the big thing, when you're dealing with a homeowner that is sinking money, like some people have endless money. Absolutely, and they plan on living in that house forever. So they're going to go above and beyond anyone that would ever. Like there is no budget in mind. Like when you're flipping a property, you need to make money, or you're working for free, right? Whereas if you own the property, you want the best property for your kids, your family. You want to make sure it's safe. You want to make sure it's done as to the top level, right? Where a flipper, sometimes they try to do that, but there's always that budget where they have to make money, right? Just same as a builder.
I agree.
Right? Yeah.
But there's the flip side to that too, where you get a group of 3-4 friends that come together. They want to buy a house. They want to make some money. Maybe they got, a good contractor like yourself involved in it. They've got a few other parties in it. It's cash tight. We need to do this, this, and this. Mm-hmm. But we're scraping dollars and pennies together the whole way down the road. You're not getting into something that's going to be safe. You're going into stuff that's been covered up. You're going into the hiding of things, and you're probably not buying something with quality. But how does a consumer define that? What are the questions to even start asking in that?
And like one thing I always recommend, because there is good flippers out there that are like actually care, and they're like doing stuff that you will never see. You will never see it. No one will ever know. It's not increasing their property value. They will not get more money, but they're still doing it. Yeah. And like one thing I always say is take pictures, right? Take pictures of what you're doing. If you're putting in the extra steps to floor framing or roof, if you're putting in the extra underlay, like the better underlay, the right flashings, right? Take pictures of that, document that, and have those sitting on your countertop when you're selling your house, right? I always recommend that, and that's the sad thing. Like, a lot of people don't recognize quality all the time, especially when renovating. Even though it's you can really see it, but it doesn't really affect the value as it should sometimes.
So something good that really rolls into this, and this spreads across the new build world, it spreads across construction in general. A friend of mine, he's in a construction business. He calls me up this week and he says, I'm going to do this on my home. We're building a new home. This is what we're going to do. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And he's like, I'm going to use this guy to do it. And I'm like, really? Well, why? He's like, well, he's $25,000 cheaper than the other guy you recommended.
Worst decision ever.
So I'm like, oh, okay. So what's motivating this? He's like, well, I've got a plan. And I've got this plan that I know that if I spend 25 grand less with him for the same scope of work, I can hire you and you're going to come inspect it along the way, and he's going to be stuck having to do it at the right way, which would have cost him $25,000 more. Mm-hmm. So right there, it just goes to show that even people we rub shoulders with don't have good financial decisions in mind, don't have good final outcomes in mind, because they're trying to find workarounds, ways to mitigate money. That conversation is always in the back of the mind that somebody that has personal investment in it, right? And like you said, yes, there is very good contracting and renovation companies out there that will do the extra mile, make sure that things are going to last. But for the bulk of what I've seen over the last 6 years and thousands of inspections, that's not the case. Yeah. The case is, the reality is, nobody's going to see it. Get the new tile on. Get it done. Is the tile going to fall off? Is it going to be an issue? No. Move on.
Yeah.
And it's always a dollar situation. And I told you the other day when we were having a kind of pre-meeting leading to this podcast, I have met numerous people that buy flips in the winter, work on them through the summer, and wait till the winter to sell them.
Yeah.
Because the roof is toast.
Yeah.
And they don't want to deal with it. It's not in the budget. So it's covered in snow. I don't really know. The roof's covered in snow. I can't tell you anything about it.
Yeah.
You'll have to wait and see it in the spring. And it's a real conversation, and it does happen.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of shady stuff happen.
Yeah.
But like you said too, I've met a lot of very awesome contractors and companies and couples. And I met one couple years and years ago. All they do is buy homes, renovate them, sell them. They're flipping homes.
Yeah.
Right? They're doing it to get to a capital point where they're buying their end home at no mortgage.
Yeah.
Right? They're working towards a goal.
And they're living in their house as they're flipping?
They live in the homes as they flip them, which is good. They target very, very specific, exclusive areas of the city. So they're already getting into, a home that needs to be renovated. They're buying that house at $700,000-$800,000.
Yeah.
And it's a toilet when they're buying it.
Yeah.
Right? But they're putting in the $300,000-$400,000 into that home, or the $150,000, whatever it's going to be, to make it right.
Yeah.
So they can turn and sell it.
And then they're living in it, so they can sell it at a good time as well.
They certainly can.
Which is
they can,
sweet.
People get the chance, like, oh, well, this home here in this location, the landscaping, the yard, the brick retaining walls.
Yeah.
This is a huge selling point in this home. So you know what? That's a good home for us to buy at this time. This is our renovation timeline, our budget. We need to have the yard ready for this one, because the yard's a big portion of this sale. Whereas the next one backs onto the LRT, and the yard really doesn't matter. So
you're basically staging your own house already.
You certainly are.
Yeah, that's
so. No, it is very interesting. So let's dive into the questions. I mean, and I had some, and you had some. They're kind of more statements and comments at the end of the day. But why don't we kick it off with what you have?
So I think we're just me and Steve both kind of picked 5 items that we kind of look out for when inspecting a flip or a renovation property, and some of the consequences that or the things you can notice when looking at these items.
Absolutely.
My 5 would be quality of roof replacement, deviation in floor structure, damages, repairs to the exterior cladding, was the electrical upgraded, and is the basement finished?
Very good. So what I had in my list in our pre-discussion was asbestos.
Yeah.
So we have to be realistic. Anything older than 1990, it's probably got asbestos. It's probably got a lot of other things in there too. And although even here in the city of Edmonton, when we do a major renovation, there is a document that actually asks for an asbestos test on it. It's not requested in most cases. Mm-hmm. So did asbestos abatement happen, or do we create a very hazardous environment? So that's a huge one for me. What was hidden? And just like I said, earlier, in my comment I wrote down here is a successful flip comes with sacrifice in one area or another. And that's the reality. Dollars can run out here, and if we don't have contingencies in every single avenue of that building that we can shuffle around to get to the end goal with an additional buffer at the end, you might have to just say, you know what, we can't do anything with that. We have to let it ride.
Yeah.
And this is the one where I just talked about a minute ago. My comment was, are you brave enough to consider purchasing a flipped home in the middle of winter? So I can tell you from experience that when you go up to a house that has a crawl space and there's 8 inches of ice in that crawl space, and just like, why did everything get shoveled right there all winter long rather than anywhere else it could go? What's actually going on here? I'm going to a 2-story in the middle of winter. Sure, I might be able to rake off some snow on the eaves of a skirt roof.
Yeah.
I'm not bringing out a 36-foot ladder to look at a 2-story roof in the middle of winter. I have to be realistic about what that customer is going to get.
Yeah.
So probably have a roofing element we have to consider in that. Plumbing systems, huge one in the city of Edmonton. We still have over 5,000 homes with lead water supply. Right?
Yeah.
We've got CAS, we've got PEX, we've got Poly B. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of these that, in the real estate world, these are very, very scared comments, like Poly B, lead. Like, these are very, very fearful, impactful statements.
Yeah.
And it's the reality of many homes that are out there, and even commercial buildings where you walk in them and you're like, you get the question after from the insurance company, and they're asking you, what was the plumbing type? I'm like, it was everything. Yeah. What do you mean it was everything? Well, there was definitely, the building's from 1950. Yeah. It has every plumbing type you can possibly imagine in there. So, and then the final one I had in here was permitting. So permitting is important. Does it mean that everybody's going to be accountable and have a perfect product at the end of the day? No. Local permitting tends to be very, very narrow in scope. I think we've touched on that enough times that we know. Yeah. But is it even being done? That's how contractors are being held accountable. And there's the odd contractor, as you know, when the permit conversation comes out, they tend to shy away from jobs.
Yeah.
And that's true.
Yeah, no, for sure. They don't want the involvement in the permitting,
or they don't want to go through the structural review because they already paid to have an engineering document done to show them how to do it. Yeah. Why do we need a permit now? Who cares? Let's just get it done. Yeah. And that happens a lot too, which shocks me. So why don't we dive into a couple of your comments here first and foremost, and you can elaborate on those a little bit, and then I'll talk about some of the things I've seen.
Yeah. So for sure, quality of roof replacement. I just feel that like the roof is an item, like you said, maybe they're just covering it with snow. Yep. Right. And and it's not even a huge cost. No. For the most part, if you're replacing the roof on a bungalow, it's, it's not the end of the world. You know what I mean? It's some of your budget, but it's, it's definitely something that always comes up in almost every inspection. How old's the roof? Like I probably get asked that 80% of the time. Right. And, the big thing I noticed with flippers is, and I kind of typically I'll start, my inspection with the roof. Right. And I kind of base what I see on the roof, especially if I know this is a flipped house, the quality of workmanship and material that went in the roof. Yep. So if they reused their underlay, right? If they reused all their flashings, right? If I can see nails all through that aren't lapped properly with the shingles, right? I know right off the bat that they probably went with the cheapest roofing quote that they possibly could have, right? And I kind of base that, okay, these guys are cutting corners. They will cut corners. They're going with the cheapest guy. They don't have the right underlay. They don't have nice drip. They don't use drip edge, right? Cheaper shingle, poor workmanship. I judge that right off the bat with, okay, these guys are willing to, sacrifice workmanship and quality with money, right? So it's just a very easy one that I can get up there, I can see, and I know right away, okay, these guys are cheaping out in certain areas, right? And it's a very easy one to tell.
So when you talk about that too, just think about how many roofs we've probably both seen over the years where you're going up to a 1950s bungalow. In 1950, you had, aluminum, galvanized, lead, like all these different flashings and materials. Yeah. And they're getting salvaged on a roof replacement for the third, fourth time in 2020.
And there's a bucket of tire around the chimney.
So, it's crazy. But with what you're saying at the same time, the conversation is being led down a very specific path. And I think there is a greater conversation that we do have to bring up in the sense that there is sometimes a lot of capital investment. And that capital investment that goes along with the renovation or the contractors involved in a flip may not actually know what to look at, right? So, when we talk about cutting corners and doing these things,
And that's an
you've seen
easy
the
one to
infills.
do it. No one sees the roof. The
nobody
inspector
goes to
does.
it. And
right?
everybody waits
Is
for
it
that.
new? Is the roof new? Okay, good. Next.
Exactly.
It's new. Good. Next. Right.
But you are right. That tends to now trickle through the rest of the project because
It's just one of those ways that I've even worked with a lot of investors, and it's like, okay, we got that roofing quote for 7,000 or 8,000, but then we got the other one for $3,000, right? He's got some stash shingles, and he's just in and out, right? But like they don't take into account that the other guy's putting in new flashing all around the chimney, right? He's like really taking his time to workmanship is 100%. Whereas the other guys are just, up, over, in, out, cheap, right? And then like a lot of times I've had these guys and they're like, oh no, I'm not going with the $10,000 roof. I'm going with the $3,000 roof. And then once drywall's installed, the roof's leaking. And it's, you know what I mean?
So
and now
true.
they're paying the other guy to come back, right? And it's the bucket of tire around the chimney.
Yeah.
So it's
Do you remember the roof I took you to downtown after we left here the last time? Like not far away.
the commercial?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a perfect conversation, right? So property management company driving the job sends me off all the quotes. And they're like, something's wrong with these quotes. Can you just take a quick look? And I'm like, of course I can take a quick look. So I go through them. One's very comprehensive. I mean, it's detailed to everything with the expected failures that are going to be found, potential structural fallout. And they're being very, very clear with their exclusions, their limitations, what they're actually doing. The next quote basically says that they'll just deal with whatever they find along the way. Well, you're hanging yourself out to dry because if you find a $100,000 structural problem, you've just married yourself to it. And we're going to hold you to that because you said you did.
Yeah.
And then you get the final quote in there and you start looking at all these things and they swing like $60,000 difference between one quote to the next.
Yeah.
Well, if that does not raise an alarm to you that somebody's trying to bid to get in the door to then start marking you up and gouging you on the back end with everything they find due to all these limitations and exclusions, you need to read what you're signing. And just because they're an established company doesn't mean that they're going to give you a good product. I've dealt with companies that are 40 years old and their work is trash.
Who got the job?
The most expensive guy.
Did he? Good.
Most expensive guy.
Yeah.
But we've also used and worked with that guy before.
Okay.
And he is kind of one of those guys that's very similar to myself with many things that I do. It's my way or the highway.
Yeah.
And if you don't like the fact that this is what I'm billing you to do this roof, and you don't like the fact that these are the products we selected because we know they perform, we're not the right company for you. So you should probably find somebody else.
Yeah.
And when a roofing contractor or a contractor takes that stand, sometimes his head feels like it's about this big and you're not sure if he's going to fall over because he's just being a jerk.
Yeah.
But in a lot of cases, they've been through the practice. They've done it over and over and over again, and they just don't know how to better communicate that to you.
Yeah.
So what was next on your list?
Let's see, man. Deviation in floors.
Yes.
Right. And I feel like that's one that can be corrected, but it takes a lot more time and effort. Right. And how solid are the floors reinforced, right? Because a lot of times you're getting into those older houses and your substrate's lifted, right? The floors are squeaking, they're sagging in areas, right? You got some structural movement. The house has been there for 50 years, right? Yeah. But did they correct that? Because I remember one specifically recently I was in, and like the floors were solid and dead level. Right. And as soon as I walked in there, and I'm like, this is a 1950s house. Like, I'm like, okay,
Not normal.
Yeah, no, these guys put some money into this house. Yeah. Like, there's dead level, right? Like, better than new construction. And like, you see that right away, and that just sets something in my mind. You know what I mean? Because like a lot of times you'll see like an inch deviation over 6 feet, and that's normal.
You had one not long ago too that you had like 2 inches.
Yeah.
With that metal floor.
Yeah. No, that was a completely different one. But basically any house, right? Yep. Any house out of the 50s, 60s, 70s, you're going to see some deviation in the floor. And if you walk in a house that's older like that and you see the floors are dead level and they're very, they feel sound, chances are they definitely put some money into the framing of the floor system in that house, right? So that's another one that's very easy to see. You can basically feel it as soon as you walk in the house, and just something that when you're viewing houses to pay attention to, right?
But people can't. Because it's not something they're going to pick up on. You and I will pick up
Well,
on
if they listen to our podcast, they might.
They might. So you guys need to listen to us. So even standing in here this morning, my laptop's over behind Dillon right now, and I had to email myself my notes. Standing right there, I could feel myself falling forward. So I said to the guys, I said, have you guys ever noticed how much your floors are sloping? And they said, no. And they've been in here a long time. They're worried about filming, recording, looking at things the same way a buyer would be.
Yeah.
They're not thinking about what their feet are telling.
Yeah.
That's your talent.
Yeah. And some people are different. Like I was never really one to notice that much. And then I started working with some different contractors, and like it drives some people absolutely nuts.
Yep.
Right.
I'm
and then,
one of those.
you know, and then, but yeah, it's definitely something that anyone can kind of pick up on.
Yeah.
As long as you're looking for it.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Next one we have here for me is damages or repairs in the exterior cladding, right? Especially if I'm dealing with like a stucco system and I see a recent repair, especially higher in the wall, right? You know, you're dealing with something that was built in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And, you know, if there was issues, especially in the upper portion or really anywheres in the wall, but if you're dealing with something, 20 feet up, 10 feet up, and there's the potential for moisture intrusion in there, you can deal with a lot of decay. Like I've peeled stucco back and just a little crack right by the eaves of your house, and then you pull the stucco off and the whole wall's just rotted right out. So that's just something I kind of look at, oh, there's a repair there. But they just repaired the area, then you can start thinking and maybe ask the question like, hey, you guys made this repair to the stucco. What was going on behind there? Was everything good? Did you take a picture of it? You know what I mean? Was there pictures prior to the repair? And that's if you are a flipper and you are making repairs to the exterior, hey, maybe I should take a picture of this prior to covering it back up, because it very well could be a question that comes up when I get this property inspection.
And that's a good one, because myself, if somebody had brought, let's just say you brought that to my question, right? You're saying, I was looking at this property.
Yeah.
Here's this chimney. I can see it's been patched here from the band up. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing I'm going to tell you is that chimney's rotten.
Yeah.
I'm going to immediately assume the chimney's rotten. And assumptions is never a good thing.
No.
But I can tell you every older stucco home, like even back to the 80s, let's not even call them old.
Yeah.
When you get into these chimneys with these crowns and bands and unlike proper caps because they don't look good, well, the chimneys are rotten. Flat out rotten. They always are. But that stucco netting and the structure of the stucco can stand there for a long, long, long time, as you know, right? Because there's a little bit of a structural factor in it. But 9 times out of 10, you're right. The substrate behind it is rotten when it's had deterioration.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So I always go with I immediately assume it's rotten. So the guidance you're giving, document it, share information, have your catalog of repairs. It absolutely makes sense. Because
100%.
Yes, like I am the guy that is immediately going to assume it's rotten.
Well, like most people, and then you're just covering your ass, right? Yeah. When you're trying to sell a house, or if you're looking at a house, hey, ask the question. Yeah,
huge value. In that.
So that's a big one, and obviously anything with exterior walls, right? Yeah. It's always a big concern. Then basically just like, was the electrical upgraded? No. Anything older, you know what I mean? That's basically typically a decent chunk of change if you have to upgrade your electrical system, and it's something that you can ask right off the bat. Hey, you have a 1960s house. Was your electrical ever touched? No? Okay, we got some work to do, right?
Fair. And decor switch plates and receptacles is not electrical upgrades.
No.
Those are purely cosmetic. And I mean, as you know,
like service entrance panels, meters.
And you know what? One thing I think that is a huge one for people to take away, whether we're US, we're Canada, no matter where we are, and even in our own city, we look at some of the most desired neighborhoods because, let's face it, location.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of homes that still have overhead services coming to them.
Yeah.
The bulk of those homes could not meet the requirements of a load demand calculation to even consider putting a hot tub in, an electric car charger in, an air conditioner in. So for a lot of the buyers that are looking at location, they're spending more money on your home. You better bring your electrician or make sure that your inspector understands electrical, so that when it does come time to bring your new Tesla in there or whatever your electric car is, whether that's even going to work out for you.
Yeah.
Because when you find out after the fact that house needs a $20,000 service upgrade, and then you start diving into it, and then you need another $40,000 to restore the walls and everything else to do some other basic upgrades in the house. Yeah. That's a disaster. And it'll lead into some of my comments too.
You'll probably just keep driving your Honda Civic.
Isn't that disgusting to think about it though? It really is.
If you don't like Honda Civics.
You bought a home that's going to limit your future and what you can do and the decisions you want to make. People don't look at that. And I'm going to talk about that when I go into asbestos.
Yeah.
Because imagine trying to do your electrical upgrade and now you have an asbestos abatement project on your hands too. It's gross.
Yeah. And then the last one for me is the basement finished? And when I say is it finished, was it finished 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago? And is it still original? Right? Because chances are, if that's the case, especially if you get into, your false floors, right? You're definitely going to start ripping some stuff apart, and you're not really going to like what you see behind those walls. It's almost a guarantee.
Yeah.
And then, it's also a good idea to just open that up and kind of see, if you do have any cracking or movement that you should seal up, right? A lot of times, an older home, the basement could be recently renovated, right? And you do see the frost wall detail that's correct, right? Which is good to see, but if it's chances are if it's more than 40 years old, you're not going to like what you see behind the walls almost every single time.
Probably not.
No. Yeah. It's usually pretty gross.
And think about how many people board over board. Right?
Yeah.
The basement's a disaster. The walls are cracked.
And that's,
The paint, there's 6 layers of lead paint. You know what? The easiest thing to do is, let's just throw another layer of drywall over it and refinish it.
Yeah.
Then we can sand it. We can do everything. We're not creating a hazard to us. Nobody's going to know the better when we're done. And that happens a ton.
And like a good area to check that would be, like under your stairwells or your utility room, somewhere where you can see like exposed frost wall and see if they actually did some correct repairs or if they did just board right over it.
Well, and don't forget too, if you are pulling a permit, you are going to be required to meet newer building codes.
Yeah.
Which means that frost wall now is not going to be a vapor barrier. It's going to be an air barrier system with air tightness, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people in the older construction industry don't like that conversation. They don't think it's right. So. But that gets technical. We're not going to go down that path today.
Yeah, because
But yeah, no, it is very interesting, and you're right. That's a huge place to look. One thing I was doing too on a lot of old homes, basements, I would always pull a receptacle cover plate. Right, try to see in the side, see what you can or can't see, because the odds are if they've put a layer of board over top of another board, the electrical box is going to be recessed behind that board. So now you'll see that next layer. So now you got, oh, wait a second. Why is that box so deep in the wall? Yeah. Right? They just pulled this up. They shimmed out the receptacle a bit, and it's dirty.
Yeah, no, for
Something
sure.
happens.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all.
That's all you had on your side of things?
Yep. Those were my 5. Yep.
Okay, so my 5, and it rolls right back into the electrical you were just talking about, was asbestos. So again, we know if we're going to demo a home, 1990 or older, again, in our jurisdiction, which is basically Edmonton, you have to submit a document to the city of Edmonton saying you've done your asbestos testing. The consultant says there's no asbestos in there. Maybe there is asbestos in there. And then in turn, you're going to take that coupled with your abatement company report together to the city of Edmonton. You're going to say, okay, this is what the inspection company found. This is our abatement plan. Can we please proceed with permitting? And the two can go hand in hand.
Yeah.
It's not like you have to wait now for the asbestos company to finish the job so you can move into the next steps. Like the cities understand that things need to keep moving. Now, St. Albert, on the other hand, I called them within the last few weeks, and I said, what is your guys' standpoint and policy on asbestos for purposes of demolition? And he says, well, what do you mean? And I said, okay, well, this is who I am. This is the company I'm calling from. Here in the city of Edmonton, we were required to do this document. We charge such and such $1, as a baseline fee and get out and do these surveys for people. I said, I'm not seeing anything advertised and definitively on the city of St. Albert's site, so I want to know what your guys' standpoint was. Yeah. So he seemed somewhat offended that I even called him in the first place, which was super, super weird. And then he finally came back full circle. He's like, hey, this is described in building code and what your contractor's requirements are. So no, we don't require anything from you. I said, so all I need to do with you then is apply for a building or a demolition permit and off I go. And yes, sir, that's true. So you now get into this, now different jurisdictions require different things in your own backyard. But what does that mean to you buying a home? Well, let's face it. We have people that are concerned about our health. We're concerned about, uranium gas right on in our homes. We're concerned about asbestos. We're concerned about lead. We're concerned about a lot of these things, as we rightfully should be. So what does that mean now to the renovation contractor? Well, you start asking the questions, and when the confused looks happen in their eyes, they're like, what do you mean asbestos? No, we didn't have any asbestos issues. We didn't see anything. Well, we can't look and tell if something's asbestos, right? We go to a laboratory. We go through the proper standards. So that's a huge one for me.
Yeah.
So if I go see, and again, an old home, there's no asbestos records on it, I'm going to have an issue with that.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I have walked into renovations, just like you've said, where there is some very, very good due diligence. And like, oh, here, by the way, here's our air clearance testing on our asbestos reports.
Yeah.
Here's the initial asbestos assessment if you want to look at it while you're here.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, of course you're going to look at it for 1 second.
Yeah.
So, yes, some people will spend the money. Some people will go through the abatement process. On the other hand,
Some
as I
people do
previously
it at
mentioned,
midnight.
they'll throw another board on top of that.
Dude.
And I even told you recently, it was a demo. It wasn't going to be a flip,
Yeah.
but it was a demo. And the guy's like, yeah, hey, I got another asbestos assessment for you. Come on down. And I got there, and it was just framing left in the house. And I'm like, there's no cladding on the outside. There's nothing left in the basement. The furnace is gone. The water heater's gone. I can see into the attic, and I'm like, so I call him up, like, what's going on here? He's like, well, it's ready for your assessment.
I bet you that happens a lot.
And I bet it does happen a lot more than I've probably ever seen it too.
No.
So you know what? I can promise you it happens in the renovation world too, where a lot of things get released into the environment and it's truly ignored. So asbestos, I think that's a good one.
One thing I want to touch on with that one too, is like you do a lot of air quality testing, right? Environmental work.
We used to do a pile of asbestos
Yes.
air testing, but we don't have a hygienist anymore directly. So
And like
not so much anymore.
No, but maybe like back when you did you notice like testing newer homes from older homes? Was there certain things that were more concerning that came up in the older homes?
So a lot of the calls, we're actually getting a pile of environmental calls right now because this is spring.
Well, I just
spring
gave you
season.
one yesterday.
Right. Oh, that's right. You did too. But it's also spring season. So we got to remember, this is why the Edmonton Home and Garden Show is happening right now.
Yeah.
This is the time when people go through spring fever. They're still trapped in their homes. They can't quite get outside yet. So, the renovations are happening at the DIY level. Huge. There's that DIY word again. So, I had one couple call me because they had, standing a wall. The wall looked weird to them. There's really nothing weird. They bought a lead paint testing kit from Amazon. It was like these swabs that you dip in water and then you rub the swab on the wall. And everywhere they were testing it, they were getting a positive for lead. Some of the compounds can really throw these off and cause false readings anyway.
Okay.
So I went back in and I use a 3M one where I can actually do my test and then you actually have a control card on the side. So you can actually check whether or not your test was proper.
Okay.
So I did 5, one failed the test. So, you do the redundancies, you do the right things. And of course you can still take that off to the laboratory and do other things. So lead's always a big one. Asbestos is a big one. And formaldehyde is always a really common conversation. But people, I think they greatly misunderstand the formaldehyde conversation for the reason that we can't differentiate what formaldehyde was directly caused in your home. So if you have 6 new chairs that just came out of a sea can from China, and you have new carpeting that came out of the flooring company on the south side, you have new vinyl that came from the other guys in all these different products, I can't walk through your home with any degree of competency and say that it's that.
Yeah.
The only way that works is basically like encapsulating. We've been that path before. We've encapsulated furniture.
Yeah.
And then done readings within the encapsulation to determine that's specifically it.
Yeah.
So lead, asbestos is the hugest one.
Yeah.
Renovations, we get a pile of questions about formaldehyde.
Okay. Nice.
Did you have any other ones on that?
Not on
Nope.
that one. That was all I wanted to touch on with the.
So you know what? I don't think we need to even touch on what was hidden. I think we've already covered that. Things are going to get covered up. Decisions are going to be made that will not likely benefit the end user in most flips. Flips are budget driven. Projects need sacrifices in certain areas. And I can tell you the sacrifice probably isn't coming from everybody's pockets.
No.
It's coming from something on the project.
And the only area you may get around that is if you are dealing with a home owner that is just sinking money into this house because he wants it to be 100%. He's planning on living there for another 40 years. This is his dream home, dream neighborhood, right? And then that would be the only really area that you could get around that budget number, I feel.
But even then, too, like you're talking about, too, with those homeowners. I mean, if there's $150K budget on a renovation for a home of whatever the value is, who cares?
You still could come.
You still might be at a wall at 150 and say,
for
okay,
sure.
Well, I'm sorry, you're not getting your $6,000 espresso maker and your $17,000 cabinets in the pantry.
Yeah.
You need to eliminate that now. And, I think that if you do some deep diving and you have the patience to do it at home, start searching out a lot of like the flip and renovation companies that are on some of the TV series, and you look into some of the histories and the backgrounds. Like those homes right there are huge examples of homes that have budget-driven processes for TV purposes. And there's a fair amount of litigation that follows all that because people go to these companies, they get this great TV appearance, they build these gorgeous looking homes, they're staged, they meet the mark, and the homes start to fall apart several months after the whole series is over. So dig into it. You'll see some very interesting stories about litigation.
No shit, I should look into that. Yeah,
it's hilarious.
Yeah.
So The next one we talked about, or I wanted to talk about, was buying a home, specifically a renovated home, in the wintertime. So over the years of doing home inspections, obviously a lot of the questions I would get asked is, do you have any concerns about looking at the home? Are you concerned about the limitations? And for me, no, because I knew from an inspector standpoint.
Get up and clean the roof off. A section. Yeah.
Or I probably even wouldn't on a 2-story.
Yeah.
I'd probably just call a few good roofers I know and be like, yeah, I'm sorry, this sucks, but I need a favor.
Yeah.
I'm looking at buying a house. I want you to get somebody on site, do this. Like, they'll be like, we don't even have anybody working right now. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
I'm like, let me pay him $500 just to go clear off. I want him to check this valley, do this, in the snow. Just make sure you have 2 guys, so nobody falls off the roof. Now I'm litigating with the homeowner for a situation. But I've never been fearful, because you and I both know, going into a situation in the middle of winter, huge Alberta snowfall. Okay, there's 3 feet of snow in the backyard. There's 18 inches on the roof. I can't get into a crawl space. I can't see this. I can't see this. I can't see this. We know what the fallout of our decision making is going to be very quickly.
Could potentially be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We know what our limitations are.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, when somebody asks me, like, are you worried about what you can't see? Well, no, I'm not worried about what I can't see, because I know. But like you've said before, how do you qualify what somebody looks as a red flag? Is very, very hard from one person to the next. Mm-hmm. But you have to be realistic that there's a very good chance that home's being sold in the winter intentionally.
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah.
And I've been in rooms where those conversations are happening about strategic planning for certain
Oh,
homes,
no, for sure, yeah.
where it's like, you know what? If we get enough snowfall, nobody's going to see that part of the roof is smoked. It's going to be really hard to see it.
Yeah.
And like, on the other hand, all the other areas are good. We just know there's a building issue there.
Yeah.
Right. So that happens a pile. Mm-hmm. We have to be realistic that every lot in Sydney needs to be graded every 5 years.
Yeah,
right?
no, for sure.
That's
Like
not
grading
happening.
and roof are definitely two big ones in the winter.
I don't have to be fearful about that. But then other than that, there's not a huge limitation.
No.
But then there becomes the question now, how well is that building performing in the wintertime? You might find out things in the wintertime you're not going to find out in the summer.
And that's what I was going to mention too. Like, there is some pros to inspecting in the wintertime.
Yeah, because you're cheating.
Yeah.
In a sense, from an inspection standpoint, you and I talk about it, like the gross misinterpretation of thermography that happens on Instagram.
Well, yeah, especially you.
Because I rage.
Yeah,
and
no,
I rage
you're like
on
a
you
level
because you're the only guy I
2.
can talk to about it.
Yeah.
And, the biggest thing is when your inspector is showing you thermal images, the first thing I want everybody to do, because I rage. And there's one guy I follow on Instagram, and this guy's posts are garbage. He's a very well-known inspector. His posts are crap. The stuff he communicates is trash. Yeah. And I've showed it to you before.
Yes.
Where I get these thermal images from people, and let's say, can you please take a look at this and tell me what you're seeing? And I'm like, I see no issue.
Yeah.
And they're like, but look at all this purple. This is bad. Yeah. I'm like, right. But if you look at the scale immediately to the right of the screen, you're going to see the entire scale is from 21.5 degrees to 24.6 degrees. The entire scale.
Yeah.
So now the whole image you're seeing is based on 2 degrees.
Yeah.
Come back and have a conversation with me when you're talking about 15 degrees or 10 degrees. Mm-hmm. And that's the issue. And that comes back to the warranty stuff and all those things that can happen where contractors that are flipping homes, builders that are involved in homes, have such a problem with inspectors because the information they're communicating is shit.
Yeah.
So be careful. So yes, we can potentially learn a ton if we're interpreting things correctly.
Yeah, no, for sure. And even poking your head in the attic in the winter.
Such an easy thing to do.
Yeah, and you're going to see so many things. Like, I would personally see things that I would not see in the summertime.
Absolutely.
You see, 3 inches of ice hanging off your rafters. Like, you're just not going to see it. And, like, a lot of times, like, the moisture, you really don't see too many signs of it. Like, you will, but you really don't know the extent of it, right? So that's, like, definitely a pro, I would say, to inspecting in the winter, as far as, like, thermography and, air leakage, stuff like that. Yeah.
So you're
probably... But I'd say there's probably more Yeah, I don't know.
I think you have to look at it both ways. It's more of a worried buyer.
I think if you need to buy a house, you need to buy a house.
And
you know what I mean?
If you're going to buy a house, you're going to buy a house.
Yeah.
There's very few people that are having the 7-year realtor plan, right?
And if you're if you're buying a house with the roof's 50% covered in snow and the inspector uncovers a section that like this roof looks like it could be older, you should expect to be able to budget to have it replaced. Right.
And there's your keyword right there. I said it before.
Like, don't buy a house where you're. Obviously, I don't think anyone should buy a house that they're strapped. Like, if you buy a house and you can't drop 10 grand into your house, you probably shouldn't own that house, right? Because that's a
10%.
Yeah.
10% is the one thing I say to everybody. I don't care if it's a commercial building. I don't care if it's a residential building. If you don't have 10% or access to 10% of your home's value, you're going to find out the hard way one day when something does go wrong.
Yeah.
It's not going to work out very well for you. Mm-hmm. And I think we've seen this in the last few years of home inspecting, where not our business to talk about people's finances, but that people are entering into some of these homes that were lower on the price point and getting into them because of very, very low mortgage rates. These are the people that are going to suffer in the back end. And, I say to everybody, contingency. You're buying an old home. Something's going to go very wrong one day. I can't tell you the first plumbing leak you're going to have. I can't tell you the day the furnace is going to fail. I can't tell you the first day your roof is going to leak. Yeah. But I can tell you it's going to happen.
The big one with me on that is where you're going to inspect the house that you believe you're going to inspect it because it's going to be torn down, right? And then it's the $80,000 house or the $100,000 house, and the lot is worth $120,000.
Yeah,
right. And then people are planning on living in it, and even if you send them an inspection report that is 150 pages long, they just kind of they don't even really, they just do it. And they still move in, and those are the ones that kind of,
it's the ones that you find out.
Well, it's not like it's a 10% repair. It's like it's a fucking $400,000 repair, right? And they still they just kind of tune out.
And have you had it? I've had thousands of inspections before I semi-retired.
Yeah.
Did you ever have it where people would literally, you get halfway through an inspection, they're going to tell you that, oh yeah, we're going to live in it for 3 years, and then we're going to build our dream home here. You ever had those conversations?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean? You're going to live in it for 3 years? Like, it's demo ready now. Like, it's not demo. It's not going to be any better in 3 years. Like, you realize it's going to leak.
Yeah.
It's going to do a lot of bad things to you until you get there. And unfortunately, some people just have that goal in mind that this is what we're going to buy. We're going to save our dollars. We're going to build a house then. Yeah, that's a hard conversation.
And at the end of the day, there's people that are homeless too, right? So it's like, it could be worse.
A decision needs to be
made. So it's like, you just got to educate them on what they're buying, and then let them decide.
So the next one I had in here was plumbing systems. So let's talk about what the common plumbing systems are.
Yep. So
of course we have lead. I believe we're still around 5,000 homes in Edmonton that have lead water supply. There is very simple solutions to that, and the number one solution is EPCOR will give you a Brita water filter system, like charcoal and everything. It's been proved that is safe for ingesting, and you're not going to have any big worry there. I even had one infill builder I know. Everything went good. Everything was all done. Project finished. People already living in their brand new $1.5 million home, only for him to have to go back and excavate the yard because EPCOR sent him a report that 6 inches of lead was missed. Oh, so technically, how that all went down, but in the end of it, the infill builder paid the entire bill for that lead on city property.
On city property.
So I don't know how that all plays out. He called and just raged to me one day that this even happened to him. Same builder, actually, he had a water line failure in the middle of winter. It was very, very frustrating for him talking about water supply over a couple of years because just a lot of things didn't go his way. Now, his water line failure, that was warrantable from the contract. So that was all good. The lead issue, he had a pretty big pill to swallow on that one, being that it was technically his problem, but it wasn't on his property. But what do? Do you tell your consumer that bought $1.5 million home from you, have a nice day, it's on EPCOR's property? No, he's a stand-up builder. He jumps in there, he eats the cost, and he makes sure his customer's happy.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, your flippers might not have that position, and they also might not have the money to go through that task after the fact, right? Yeah. Property's been sold, 4 partners involved, everybody got paid out. You're going to go back to the 4 partners and tell them everyone has to put in, another $3,000 a piece to do this excavation and deal with this problem.
Yeah.
I can promise you're going to have a hard conversation with some of your investors.
Yeah, no, for sure. I feel like that's a very similar conversation between like infill builders and flippers.
And flippers, for sure it
because
is.
I feel like they're very similar. Like I know flippers that have built houses and they've done all right. You know what I mean? Yeah. They build a decent house. They definitely know what they're looking at. And basically profit margins a lot of times are very similar.
Yeah,
at the end of the day,
yeah, 12 to 15%, man. That's what you're getting at the end of the day.
So I think that could.
So lead.
Yep.
Cast iron, huge one.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a lot of waste lines, vent lines are gonna be cast iron, old toilet tie-ins. The trouble with cast iron and galvanized, which we do see time to time, when these rot, they rot from the inside out and they split. Mm-hmm. So you could be there 1 week and 6 months later that line splits. You don't have that foresight to tell anybody when that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But if it's galvanized, it probably needs to be taken out right away.
Yeah.
Cast, on the other hand, that's a hard one to swallow because a lot of homes with cast waistlines and drain lines, even in a bungalow, like you're doing a lot of openings. Like you're opening the attic envelope.
Yeah.
You're going through the roof. You're going through the basement.
Yeah.
And if you're doing it right, a lot of times you're breaking up the floor.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, these are thousands of dollars in conversation.
Yeah. And that's one that's very similar to like the electrical, where it could be like a straight up question right off the bat.
Sure,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
I'm dealing with a 60s house.
Yeah.
You know, was the sewer replaced, right? And
And here's a funny one on a waistline. So lateral, we're coming down from a toilet, running back to the stack. The cast had split.
Yep.
So they relieved the stress. They rolled the split to the top, and then electrical taped it and duct taped it. And of course, when I went and reported on it, I'm like, the waistline needs to be DIY to a T. And so, of course, I reported it needed to be replaced. And the amount of pushback and inspector bashing that went on as the result of a rotten and split waistline that had been taped back together was unbelievable. My credibility has never been questioned so bad in my life.
Oh, really?
I was just shocked. I knew the realtor that was involved in that one pretty good. And he was obviously sharing this with me. And we're kind of having a chuckle in the background.
Yeah.
But like the emails and the bashing that happened behind the scenes was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So we've got cast. We need to think about the reality that the copper is going to be in there. We don't tend to have the fears with copper the same way as it ages. We're probably going to have some polybutylene, which of course we don't see in the markets anymore. Great varying opinions on the performance of polybutylene depending on who you talk to, UV exposure. Yes, it's very brittle, but are we going into your walls and ripping at your plumbing all the time? Well, no, that shouldn't be happening with things that are strapped.
No.
But yeah, it can absolutely break down. There's a reason building code doesn't allow it anymore.
Yeah.
But it's probably in that ceiling somewhere here or in over there if you're finding it over here, because you know what, you could have multiple different patches in there.
And that's the thing. Like I've seen a lot of older houses with it, and it seemed to perform well.
But that's because it was probably a repair at some point in time from component A.
Yeah, maybe. But other times I've seen where like you get into a house and I got poly B, and then you see a wet spot here and a wet spot there and a wet spot here and a wet spot there, and you're like,
poly
oh
B
shit.
doesn't usually come with dripping.
Well,
It usually comes with broken.
I've seen it. Yeah. I don't know. I've seen it drip. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And then obviously then we get into newer PEX products too. And if you look at some reports, and SGI actually had a really good report there, the Saskatchewan, big, larger underwriter. And they even documented, it was years ago it came out, and I could find it again if I wanted to, but they even documented PEX, like our current standard plumbing, that they had issues with from like this date to this date, this date to this date.
Wow.
But I've never heard of anybody getting questioned about PEX in their home.
No.
So what I mean, distribution of plumbing is a huge thing, because you know what? Very few people have appropriate insurance coverages. And you know what? If you have a component issue or a home inspection got shared with your insurance company, a part of an insurance questionnaire, and it talked about plumbing issues that you had in that report, talked about dripping faucets or a wet spot that was found, I can promise you that company will mitigate that claim like that.
Yeah.
Because like, no, you knew you had plumbing problems upon signing your policy.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody's always looking for an out.
Yeah.
So that's a huge one. It's permitted, right? We're moving sinks, we're rearranging. You know, if we're now on the other hand, we're just replacing components. There's nothing.
Yeah.
But there's a large portion of plumbing that's typically permitted, and I can promise you, in a flip and in a DIY, it's not happening.
And
you know it's not.
Yeah, and the big thing with that too, like I remember it was like a 1912 house, and like you're looking for so much in a 1912 house,
Absolutely.
right? But you're not really thinking poly B right off the bat, right? But you should be. Right?
Well, it lived through the era.
Yeah. So like, I remember this house specifically. I'm like looking at all these things and like, honest, like, you know, it's 1912. Like it's pretty hurt in shape, right? No major upgrades, other than the plumbing system in the 90s, which they changed all the poly B.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So it's like one of those things that, you know, just because it wasn't in the time era, like whether it's the aluminum time era, the poly B time era, you definitely still need to look for those things, right? And those are very easy things to identify, especially poly B, as you're walking through a house. If you're educated on it, right? You can literally see it and be like, okay, I'm gonna have to spend this much to replace this, right?
Absolutely.
Potentially, you can get quotes on, like, you know, get educated on that stuff prior to even booking a home inspection, save everyone some time and money.
You know what though? But the logic doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
And it's fine because I get paid when
I know
when
logic
call.
doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So here's a funny example. So there's an area in Sherwood Park called Craigavon. So we had a family friend that built a home in Craigavon way back in the day. They literally lived there up until like 4 years ago. We knew the buyers that were buying the home as well. So like we knew the people who were selling the home, knew the people who were buying the home. And they had a pretty reputable Poly B company come in, give them a quote during the time of the inspection for replacement of the Poly B. Now that home had never experienced a leak, never ever had a reportable problem, like literally nothing. But for them, it didn't matter. They were still gutting the house, doing a major renovation, opening up the walls, and replacing the entire plumbing distribution system for an additional $35,000. Big house.
35 grand.
Well, that was the wall repair, running a whole new line. Like that was a lot of work.
That was a big house.
It was a big house. It was 2-story. But that flips back into, okay, so sure, there's that one person that recognizes this as potential. They're just going to mitigate the problem right off the top. They're putting it into it. They're not going to make it a part of the real estate conversation because it's not the seller's fault it has Poly B. That's what was used. So when these things do become real estate conversations, it's never made sense to me. But at the end of the day, they knew what they were getting into. They knew what was going to be associated to that. Whereas you're talking about the 1912 house that maybe it had a redistribution of newer stuff. What if you do take a loss one day and your 3/4 inch supply to your big giant tub for a fast fill lets loose in that house and you take out 3 levels of a home? Because that happens.
Oh yeah,
and it happens bad.
and you'd rather that than your toilet water.
Just, you know what? Well, I mean,
because it happened to me with toilet water, and
gross.
yeah,
That's gross.
It's a different conversation.
I have seen a septic system failure put 4 feet of water into a basement before.
Yeah,
that was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. 4 feet.
Yeah,
in an entire basement.
Sewage.
Really high water table in the area. One of the manway seals failed.
Okay.
So the septic system started to fill from groundwater in the spring.
Yeah.
Backed up into the house until it equalized.
Yeah, that's gross.
So nasty.
Yeah.
Okay, so next one I had was, so you were talking about the floor structure, and then I basically just had permitting. The reason I thought about permitting when we were having our meeting earlier this week, thought of a home I visited back in the elusive St. Albert. There was no permits for the renovation, yet they still had a sign on the front lawn about this major renovation on the go. How nobody got triggered to say that maybe the city should go maybe stop in there and see what's going on, because they had done a lot of work in this house. But so it was very typical Laurier Heights type home. You know, the sloped vaulted ceilings in the bungalows, like a really low slope vault. And it had a flat ceiling, or sorry, vaulted in the one area, but then flat in the main living room area. And they wanted to open the whole space up. Now, this is not a complicated changeover, right? Because it's already rafter construction, right? So we've already got rafter construction laying at the ridge of the roof. So to throw a beam in there and take out the interior walls is not a hard thing to do.
No.
Very, very easy. So I'm like, okay, here's all the drawings. I'm like, oh, I know this engineering company.
Decently
my buddy
easy.
owns this engineering company.
I wouldn't recommend that as a DIY.
No, and it was.
Yeah,
And
so
this is where it
might
gets
be
awesome.
easy, but it's still
Okay, so easy for the right person. So let's qualify that.
Yeah.
So engineering documents comes from a friend of mine's company. I'm like, okay, this is a solid drawing. We're putting a wooden column on the other end between the windows and the exterior wall. Like, this is going to pick up load path. Like, this is going to work. But you know what? I didn't see anything in his drawings on how he was dealing with it, the floor structure.
Yeah.
And I'm like, don't see it. And then finally see a note in the drawing on where to do the blocking.
Yeah.
So he didn't have the walls open when he went in. So they left notes and like, this is what it should look like. You know, please contact us at the time the walls have been open. They were never contacted. So the first thing I do is to go to the basement. That area was now open because of the laundry room, and there's no blocking where this column should be. So now that tells me we're laying a column on top of a floor structure and nothing else. So I'm like, okay, I need to go into the attic. So I get into the attic. I can see the beam. I'm crawling through, and I can't see, of course, the other side, but I can only see where it attaches to the inside of the attic, where it transitions now into this big vault.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is not adding up. Like, I can't even see it. So as I went through it, the strapping that they had on it was the only thing actually holding it in place. There was no support to a load-bearing interior wall, and the support they needed to add for the column wasn't there.
Yeah.
So no inspections happened, so now you have a major structural on that. The people still bought that home and didn't fix it.
Oh, wow.
So I don't
That's
know.
crazy.
Don't know how I didn't communicate
They didn't
things.
fix it.
Never fixed it.
That's crazy.
So, I mean, the roof will probably come down one day and it'll sag out, and it's going to be a bad day because it's going to be a super expensive fix. But those are the same ones you get into them. You go into these basements, and you're just like you're saying, right?
Yeah.
You've got a false elevated floor over here because there's such a big flooring issue.
Yeah.
Then you're back to concrete over here, and this floor raises up 4.5 inches because they want to put a shower in a place that they didn't want to break up a floor.
Yeah.
It is absolutely crazy to think about what might be hiding with a lack of permits.
Yeah.
And then you start worrying about, like, do I need to be concerned about my heating system, putting carbon monoxide back into my home? Because
Yeah, no, for sure.
flue sizes are way too big and it's drafting.
Yeah.
There is a degree of accountability that comes with the permitting process where, you know what, even though the scope might be very narrow from the authority having jurisdiction, at least somebody that is professionally trained in that specific building element is going to come and look at these things, and they're either going to approve them or not approve them.
Yeah.
Variances always exist. That means that nothing might ever be perfect, and that something might have a variance to make it okay because you made a change.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think permits are super, super important.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And like, you know, it's definitely not an end all be all though.
No.
And like, that's a big one I want to stress too, because like, oh, I got the permit, it's good. Nah, I disagree, right?
No, I
Because
do
like,
agree.
I've seen stickers on framing permits. I've seen many permits where it's like, man, this is not right.
Yeah.
Right. Where it's like, you know, someone just came in and said, nope, this is good. Kind of went over, even if they go over the safety officer's head, right?
Yeah.
Which can happen. If you're an engineer, right?
Yep.
And then, nope, that's good. Built the code, and then the DIYer took it on, and the engineer was kind of just like, whatever. I'm almost retired, right? You know, it's definitely it's not the end all be all, right?
No, and don't forget too, on the engineering side, I mean, it's not an engineer's job to follow up on you and make sure you did your job.
No, 100%.
Their job's to give you the documentation and the instructions you
Yeah.
need to do your
Yes,
job.
yes.
It's very, very few people that'll call that engineer back and say, you know what, we're done. We want you to look at it before we close things up.
Yeah.
Where more people should. They
Oh.
really, really should.
Oh, 100%.
So,
Yeah, especially like any additions or anything like that on older properties.
yeah. So how are we doing for time?
Yeah, I think we're
pretty close.
Yeah, and I got so much more to talk about.
It can never. It never ends when you start talking about this sort
Yeah.
of stuff. There's always something new that we're going to see every day.
Yeah.
And it's always evolving.
Okay, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks.